Oh boy, oh boy. Well, yesterday was a long one and I managed to lose some of the video on the way, but at least I had everything, most of everything. Anyhow, tonight I'm going to utter the prophetic and probably fatal words. This one's going to be so easy and straightforward. No. It's a Harley Benton CST 24, referring to the 24 frets. And it's a sort of, that bloke, Paul Reed Smith, PRS, lookalikey. Is that sticky stuff or is that scratches? I think that might be some sticky stuff. I'll get that off. Yeah, PRS style. Good looking beast. This is a sort of a semi-acoustic version, probably a little bit heavy on the head end. You could always shove some lead in there. I've done worse in my time. Anyway, off camera, because it took me so long to do this yesterday, off camera I've tweaked the nut, the replacement nut, and got it perfect, ready to fit. Tiny bit of back angle needed on there. Now there's a little bit of what I think of as sitaring here, but my problem is I don't know whether it's from this end here. When you look at this brake angle business going on here, it's marginal. It's not what you really want from a bridge. So this is one reason why I don't like this bridge, ladies and gentlemen spoons. So look, for no good reason at all, somebody's designed that bridge so the strings pass across the along the top and off the edge of there, nearly horizontal. I mean, that isn't a good enough angle to assure that it's going to be working. So we really could do without that. And we go to the far end here and we've got a similar thing going on, especially if these beasties, which they always do, these lean forward a little bit, which this one is, but it's not too bad. What I might do is try and find, well, I don't know if I've got some alternative. No, that's actually not a bad version. Sometimes they lean further than that, and in leaning, this cheap bridge loses its brake angle altogether, and it's very subtle, so you don't really notice it, but you get, a bit of a. So it's either the angle of the slots at this end. I've taken off the original plastic nut, you see, because again, really far too long and straight. We don't want the risk of those strings running along such a flat thing. We want a narrower, we really want a narrower nut than this. Big flat nuts are not a good idea, excuse me. Anyway, and here we are with favourite whiny complaint of mine. I've been over this before, but I'll whine about it a bit more, but I won't make it the thumbnail whine this time. Signature whine. But this is the completely ridiculous bridge design. Now, in talking to Stuart yesterday when he dropped this, was it only yesterday? Only yesterday. Whenever it was. Yeah, it was yesterday. Yeah. When he dropped it, we talked about this and I had my little rant at it, and he knows I don't like this bridge. But the reason I don't like it is that Wilkinson, whoever devised it, came up with this little movable piece that you can push backwards and forwards and lock. And I've just, every time I've seen this bridge, I've thought to myself, there's no point to it. And some people, I've said this before, but people who can't be bothered to look at it for long enough assume that I'm just talking crap, and they go, of course it's useful, you just don't understand how it's meant to be used. Well, I've looked at it for so long, I know exactly how it's meant to be used, and there's no other way of using it other than the way it is here, which gives you no alternatives whatsoever. In fact, all that it allows it to do is to be moved forward too far, which it is in this case. So we could allow it to go, we should push it back a little bit to get the correct intonation pattern. But apart from that, you can't take it off and turn it over. You can't turn it back to front in case you had a wound G. Now, I realised yesterday what they probably intended when they made this was to make a separate piece which had the reversed pieces already in play, which actually would have been a smart idea. So you would have ended up with something that looked. So stay there. Oh, God's sakes! Why am I making such a pig's thing? Right. So currently we've got. Actually, let's say we'd go like this. We'd go E, B, G, D, A, E. Right, so you'd get, so currently it isn't like that. It's set in a 3-plane, roughly, even though this is too far forward. It's supposed to be in a 3-plane and 3 wound. But there are other occasions where this one may be a good idea to, oh, I can never figure out where this is supposed to be. Where's the gap? It would be here, wouldn't it? So let's say this piece came off like so, this little doofer, and there's your line down there. Now imagine if we had this piece, you can see it's different. This one has the left side is back and the right side is forward. Here, the left side is forward and the right side is back. This is for a wound G. Okay, that would be perfect. You take this off altogether and you replace it with this one, right? That would be a smart move. Then you don't have to buy another bridge. And you would expect to see this extra piece manufactured and included in that kit, or included with that bridge for a couple of pennies extra. But guess what? They didn't do it. They haven't done it. They didn't do it. They've never intended, I don't think. Well, maybe they did in the design studio, but they never made it. I've never seen this bridge come with 2 pieces, but it needs 2 pieces, and that would make it a useful adaptation. Currently, as it stands, there's no actual benefit of having this here. This might as well be preset 3 and 3, like lots of other simple pre-compensated wraparound bridges. Got it? I know, it just annoys me, and yeah, Stuart knows it annoys me because we had a joint rant about it yesterday. Anyway, aside from that, it works okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just that kind of attempted, look how cool I am, but I don't really do anything. Now, this guitar came yesterday with a huge high action at this end. It's actually much less now. I've put the new nut in, but it still needs a tweak. So that's the first thing. It also came with a high action at this end, and it came with, I think, quite a bit of relief. Let's just check. And I think it's also got 10s. Sorry about this. That's just me. Now, tonight's plan is to get this done within a reasonable time and go and do the shopping I didn't do yesterday. So we've starved. A little bit of relief there, which we don't necessarily need. So let's dial that out. And I am definitely touching wood. What do people think I'm saying? I'm touching wood in the sense that, now we're on the slack now. Let's see what happens. We're going to dial it out altogether. I touch wood that this thing is going to be as straightforward now as I think it will be, because I could really do with that today. So adjusty, pretty flat. It's about 0.15. We could put a little bit more flattening on it, because we do know that we're going to go down to 9s afterwards, and I'm pretty certain these are 10s. I could be wrong, but I think. Do you do? I was just listening to some Beatles anthology stuff. Never really, yeah, these are 1046s. So we're going down to 9s, but it's okay for the leveling part of things. Yeah, listening to some anthology stuff, and I've never actually listened to the anthology. Why? I don't know exactly. I think because the thing I got into more was listening to the old Star tapes in Hamburg. I just thought those were absolutely fantastic. Now, if I could take all of these off, but what I think I will, I need to just paint these things the correct colour, and then I'll do the final adjustments to the action. So sorry. Yeah, so I didn't really ever get around to listening to Anthology 1 and 2, and I was just having a playthrough there, and it sounded quite some nice stuff. Little differences. I was less, I don't know. I was going to say I was less interested in these tiny little differences than I was in completely different things, like hearing them play live at the Star Club in Hamburg, which is quite incredible. When you get those tapes, or you listen to those tapes, and some people seem to think, and I think one of the reasons it probably didn't get released for millions of years is that by modern standards, or by hi-fi 60s standards even, the quality of those original tapes were just really bad. I mean, they were of the quality that you and I could have recorded with our toy tape recorder back in the 70s, but it's late 60s, early 70s. But so the rubbish quality, but I don't need the precision sound quality to to enjoy the feeling of being there and the atmosphere of it. When you were there, you didn't hear it in any sort of high fidelity. You heard it as a kind of screeching, not screeching, but a massive wall of sound, or at least a fairly big wall of sound. So I have no problem at all with the Star Club noise style quality, sound quality. Anyway, so I found myself listening more to that than to sort of 7 different versions of Dear Prudence or something. I don't know. I don't really know exactly what's on Anthology anyway. You know, it was funny. There was a period about 6 months ago when I couldn't move for Taylor Acoustics, and I haven't seen one since. What am I doing? It's weird, I haven't seen one since. Maybe I did all of the available ones in the country at the time, or the ones that were kind of coming up ready to be done. And after that, well, just have to wait. Now, the thing about these slots is I'm not comfortable, I'm not convinced they're pointing in the right direction. Oh, what the hell is this now? Storage full, give me a break. Hold on. Okay, this is rubbish. My phone is clogged up. I'm going to have to work on what I've got unless it downloads and deletes some stuff. Right, sorry about this. It wasn't meant to be this way. It's unmanageable. The iPhone is just the shittiest by miles file handling thing. You cannot clear it in any kind of sensible fashion. Right, this is now just below 150, and this is on 125. So this is absolutely bang on the action at this end. We've got a flatter neck now, and now we're going to take care of these slots. Now it's unfortunate that we'll have to do a little bit of moving of these, but I think we've got to get the angle right. It's got to be leaning backwards, so we have to do it. So we're going to basically just cut it back like so. And sometimes a way of helping this along is to get a little bit of this stuff. Cut, sharpen it with a pencil, get it nice and sharp if we can, and then just sprinkle a bit of paint some graphite into the slot so we can just see where we're cutting with the file, because we don't want to we're very close to not wanting to take any further material down at the front edge. We're almost on perfect first fret action, so I don't want to risk that, so I've got to be extremely careful. So I'm going to go in there like so. It gives me a bit of a chance to see what I'm doing. I'm afraid you can't have a close-up because of the problem we're having at HQ with the memory business. Okay, so now I can see the backward angle of my file, and frankly, that's sort of where I want it to stop just now. Okay, now I'm going to go a little further if it needs it, tiny bit for height. We can allow it now to cut the front edge just very slightly, but in some ways I'd still rather cut backwards, if anything, just so we have that good jump off point. So it makes a slightly bigger slot than we had before, but I would rather the right first fret action plus the correct angle. It's very important. I'm less worried about how things look ultimately than how they play. I mean, yeah, we can take care of both, but the important thing is this plays right, and it's you know, the fine tuning, tiny aesthetics, they're secondary. They're kind of, yeah, luxury if we get those right. Now it's quite difficult to cut with this. We're on the mark there, good. Yeah, difficult to cut sometimes with these files. They're good and they're not good. sometimes they don't want to cut, and I don't know if they've worn over the few years I've had them, but sometimes they seem to cut really well, and sometimes they just feel a bit spongy. So I'm going to now do the 13, and again we're going to concentrate. You can feel that or hear that one's cutting quite well. And concentrate on the cutting backwards business. And hopefully we're trying to miss the front edge. We're on the mark anyway with that one, so that's fine. A way to check this, by the way, is if you really think that this is not playing right, we can put something, a little metal, piece of metal, or even a piece of tusk or something under there, just to form a little saddle. That might do actually. We'd have to slack it off, but we can put it under there. So let's try it. Look, so hear that? That sort of slightly spongy sound. So now I'm going to put this, it's going to change the tuning obviously, but I'm going to put that under there, and the action is going to be much higher. But this is giving it a, let's put it on the angle, so it's got a slight, see if we can get it balanced there. Nah, I would probably be better off, just for the hell of it. Let's see if I can just shape this to what I want before I put it there. We want to run up the back, running up the back, running up the back. That's the wrong side, isn't it? That'll do. What was that? The B, right. So we'll run up the front of this little temporary saddle. I keep thinking, where's my phone? But it's over there trying to download or unload its memory. What do you think? I think that bridge is making this a little bit mushy, if I'm honest. I would perhaps suggest Stuart get a replacement. I don't have any nice spares wraparounds. I've got one in gold, but that's obviously in gold, which looks a bit odd. But I would suggest changing it. You can get this type for about 15 quid. They also have a problem. They come up very flat as well. But sometimes that's got a little bit more adjustability. I think that's giving us a little bit of deadness. That's just my personal take on this. So I would consider another bridge. We don't have time to get one in now. I can have a look and see if I've got one that's any sort of use, but I'm not sure we do. Same here. For my liking, it's a very tiny fraction to. I'm going to put a little tiny piece of metal under there. So compare that. Don't mind the note. To oops. Yeah, it's not that much different actually. I don't know. I'm not convinced. That's all I'm saying. Right, let's check out these others. It's almost on the correct height anyway. Yeah, we're bang on, but I just want to make sure it's doing the same thing. I want it pointing down a little bit. Red. Oh, I don't know where I'm looking anymore. So downwards cutting, downwards cutting, downwards cutting. I think that will do. Don't want to adjust it in any height sense of it. Now this one. Something like that. Yes, so I'm quite critical of these some of these wraparound bridges, especially the ones that have very little break angle to begin with, and then particularly then if they tilt at all, which they often do, then we're in trouble. But we're sure. I think this should be okay. Anyway, so really most of what I've got the height of this nut just about right to begin with. Most of what I'm doing here is cutting those slots backwards so that we know that we've got a clear space behind the launch point at the very front of the nut, like so. So the pencil really helps me to gauge that properly. I'm a bit tall this one, so we can go down a bit on this. How much? Well, trial and error. It's funny, you think you've... think you're there and then you ain't there. Okay, so this one, 26. Okay, I see that's in good shape. Blue, 36. And finally, the orange, 46. This final one here. 18 to 20, a bit more. Right, that's all of that. Okay, so we are basically in the, oh, there you are. Let's go and see what, if anything's happened over here to this one. Will it clear any memory? I've hooked it up to, I'm supposed to just general memory. General. It's supposed to, I don't know, connect to wherever it connects to my laptop and make sure they're both empty and stuff. Where are we at? General, memory, battery, storage, standby, no, general, storage, background, I found storage. Ugh. Got tons of applications. I don't know why they're so full up. And almost no music, loads of system data, loads of iOS. But the photos are the biggest one. But I can't seem to control the photos in any sensible way. Nobody's ever made sense of it for me. iCloud photos are on. Download and keep originals. What does that mean? Optimize iPhone storage. If your iPhone automatically upload. If your iPhone is low on space, yes. Full resolution photos and videos are automatically replaced with smaller device size versions. But how? Optimize iPhone storage. Download and keep originals. No, I don't want the originals. Shared albums. Use Face ID. Share hidden album. No. Mobile data. No. Play videos. View HDR. So, according to this, I have got nothing. I can't save any space on my photos. I've got a certain number of videos in here which frankly I don't need now. Well, some of them I do, they're historic things, but they're only a minute long. So it probably ends up at about being 40 minutes or something. That's peanuts. But the thing is, I did a ton of recording yesterday and it hasn't freed that space up, even though I've deleted the damn thing. That's what's annoying me. It's trying to sync something to the iCloud, which will then presumably free up. So I'm just going to have to write it off for today. I'm sorry. It's just junk. I can't force it to do anything. It won't obey me. Let's just get it on. Otherwise, I'm not going to make the shop again tonight, and we'll starve, and the cats will starve. Damnations. Right. Let's just do it. So that's not stuck down yet, but that's just nicely placed there, and we're just going to go into the mode of leveling. See how far we space these out. I might replace this one actually with one of my other new ones. This is not. This is. I think it might be a StewMac one. I'm not sure. So here we are. We're going to calibrate the curve, and it's already calibrated, which is good. So we'll work with that. Off the side, spread the strings, and here we go on our diagnostic run. These are very big, tall, lovely frets, so we shouldn't have any problems with them. But I'm not going to be at all surprised if we discover a bunch of high and low things. And sure enough, this wooden neck is showing exactly that. I can't really show you up close now because the up close phone is. So this is interesting, right? We've got Harley Benton neck, and I'll have to tell you what it's doing. Barely cutting, not barely cutting, hardly cutting a little bit, not a lot, not a little bit, not some, not a lot, some, not. So basically, I'll sort of give you the low view, right? I'll give you the view of what's really low here. Let's just go low, low, low. Not the ideal way to show it, but you can see it from that overhead camera now. So low, so low. Oh, hang on. That's not exactly true because I'm not looking at the right side of the things, am I? So that went on the floor. That's messy. Okay, so there's a big low patch. Then we've got half a patch there, low, and we've got a single patch, single one there, and then we've got a bit of a low one there. So that, and I'll show you where we've got very high, just to make a contrast. Really unusually high. I mean, not, yeah, quite a bit high. One there. Really, that's the main one, and then perhaps one here. And the rest, I would be calling them sort of equal. And actually, if we're honest, this one's a low one as well. So you can see we've got a lot of downs in this. We've got some that are cutting, and they would be what I call okay, but the large majority along here are low. So we've got a swoop down here, we've got a high spot here, which probably could be a badly laid fret, and it does look to me like there's a bit of a tiny gap. Now the problem is you really can't tell that until you've arrived at it by this diagnostic. So some people would say, well, I would bash that with a thing. I'm going to avoid, or try and avoid doing that, because I've cut it already some, and I don't want to loosen it up. I'm going to assume, unless I can see otherwise with my eyeballs, I'm going to assume that this is kind of glued in place as firmly as it needs to be. I don't see any bend or anything, so I don't want to bash any glue seal and get it to do anything, come undone or anything. I'm just going to treat it like it's firmly fixed, and I'm going to just work over it. Now, this topography of this neck, the second run on the same pass or the same track is going to, more than anything, just tell me how seriously these, or how serious these dips are in the whole neck. And you know, here all of this is really low, so there's a clear swoop downwards here, which will be affecting how the thing plays. So if I find my own way home, where's the, there it's gone, it always hides. If I now put this string back on, And we've got the action set where we want, we've got the neck set at the sort of level of flatness that we want. And now I want to hear how, now if these are really low, in the low spots, which are here, that's one, and here's a couple, and then everything between there and there, I'm expecting to hear some chokes at, like that. See, that one's a little squishy because it's in a very distinct ditch. That one's fine because it's high. That's in a ditch, so is that. That's in right in a hole. Now we've got brand new jumbo frets, practically new. Anyway, so we've got a lot of material, and I'm going to go one more run on this. But actually, before I do it, I'm going to double check the calibration just to be sure. It never hurts if you've done one or two passes. The idea about how much you take and how much you don't take is instinctive, no, experience based really. So I'm going to just sort of, based on experience, I think I'm put a tiny bit more curve on this, but I think I'm all right for one more run on here. They are big frets, so we're not in a risk of making them feel low. So I'm just going to run up and down lightly as possible, and just consider this my final run. And we're going to live with whatever these dips dictate on us, to us. We'll kind of live with what it says we have to live with. So after 3 passes, this one's been hit very hard. These are all just about touching. That one's still just below. Ditch there, one there, and the others are coming. We're just about getting in contact with the others. So a combination of one very high here, which is just going to have to be worked out in the process of recrowning. That's the deepest trench. Okay, now we've got this on a very challenging setting. So this is 125. It's as low as any guitar I would ever try to make go. So I think it's playing pretty good considering. And if we had to, if we weren't happy, we could always bring this bridge up a tiny fraction. But I don't think we need to. I think that's playing well enough. And then we're going to do some sanding on top of that. So now I'm moving across to the B track. And I'm sort of expecting to see a continuation to some degree, some extent. I see a continuation of what the frets were telling us, but sometimes we find that as we move inwards on the radius, the thingies even out, the kind of hills and valleys start to kind of lessen, which I think is happening here a bit. So we're touching there, not there, still a low one. Everything's touching here, high there again still, definitely low there, back up to quite high there, low there, touching there, low there, and around about here just about okay. So, you know, it's not terrible. So after 8 years, and Stuart heard this yesterday, so close your ears if it's boring you. But this is what I learned in the last 8, 9, 10 years of doing this, and that is that what we're really leveling is an uneven surface caused by compression, rather than the individual frets being not pushed in enough or pushed in too far. Yeah, we're basically taming a wobbly, compressed, bunched up fingerboard, and it's the organic wood, organicness of the wood that's the challenge in all of this, because every single neck crumples and bends in a different way. So every single neck has more or less of these hills and valleys in different positions. So no two are exactly the same. There are some sort of commonly recurring type of groupings, but yeah, everything is a little bit different. So, but you'd be amazed how imprecise. I used to think that, like I say, if we had a low fret by miles, I used to think the low frets, somebody in the factory had hammered them in far too hard on a Friday evening just to get out the door. And actually what I learned in that time is a high fret is literally that. It is what it claims to be on the tin. In other words, like we see here, a fret that's not been bashed in properly. It may have got caught with some rubbish underneath the tang or something, and it's not gone down properly. And it's, having done loads of refrets, it is easy to do. It can be the tiniest little obstruction and the tang won't go down. So high frets are what tend to be what they say they are, one high fret, and you can tackle them. Low frets, or groups of high frets, often are the tops of the hills. Yeah, low frets are usually just caused by the bunching of the neck. So that's and they're the ones that limit what we can do most of all, because to take down a high fret, when you have low frets, they effectively make the next fret high, even if it's just averagely high and not particularly high. The fact that there's a low spot here makes the ones after it high. So in order to solve that problem, we have to take down all the surrounding frets a little bit, which is quite costly in metal, but it's the only way we can overcome this compression. The only other way we can overcome the effects of this compression on wooden electric guitar necks is to make them out of carbon fibre, or perhaps make them as laminate construction, or reinforce them with carbon fibre rods, which may be worth doing all the time. I made one a couple of years ago with carbon fibre rods in it, and my customer seemed very happy with it. So, but I wasn't, when I did it, I wasn't testing it in quite this sort of way, so I'd like to be able to do that more. So I've got another neck to make, so I would expect I will, if I'm using wood, I'll either use roasted wood, or I will use, if I use standard maple, I will use reinforcing rods, carbon fibre, yeah, fiberglass, carbon fibre, which I have a couple out here somewhere on the shelf. But it's yeah, controlling this compression bunching seems to be, or eradicating it. We either have to eradicate its effects via leveling with the strings on, as I'm doing here, which is why I like this method, or we have to design it out by using carbon fibre or possibly laminate multi-part necks that resist bunching when they're compressed. So yeah, and interestingly, I'm starting to see more and more that roasted necks appear to be much freer of this compression bunching than any other kind of, well, certainly than regular wood construction necks. So I've got a couple coming up to work on as well, a couple of Adams in roasted maple, so I'm really keen to sort of test everyone. Since I thought about that and came up with the hypothesis, I've done about two or three since then, and each of those has turned out to be proved the theory. A little tiny bit frizzled, but we're in the hole there. See, look, a low one, not touched at all. So just before the 12th fret, or the 11th as it's commonly known, let's work around the 11th a bit, just to hit on that spot there. So I'm just kind of pressing down there a little bit, that's all. So the frets, it's interesting because if you look at these frets, you would analyze them and say, actually, Harley Benton, good stuff. You know, your fret work is great because they look fantastic. The ends are beautifully done. And it's not the fret work, funnily enough. I guess this is the definition. It's not the fret work itself that's the bigger problem. It's the bunching of the neck under compression that's the bigger problem. But we can only cure it or take care of it by leveling. So we are kind of taking off metal to compensate or to cure the bunching effect, which is a really odd thing to think of, but that's what we're doing. So is it Harley Benton's fault? Well, yes and no. I mean, certain bits of cuts of wood probably resist this bunching better than others. Like I said, I certainly know carbon fibre reinforced does, multi-part does, certainly fully carbon fibre does, roasted does, definitely, and you know, the question would be is which of those, if Harley Benton, for example, took my word for this, you know, this was the biggest challenge that we have to overcome with the process of fret leveling, is the compression, not, or is the results of compression, not the actual frets, the way the frets are laid themselves. It might be that it might be worth their while to consider more roasted maple necks and or more reinforcement. A little bit up there, see we're in a hole again there, number 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18. 18 is really low, so I just want to spend a bit more time up at 18, press it down a little bit, and then that's going to be it. That's all I'm going to do. It's pretty good, but it's taken a bit of, you know, a bit of hitting on some of these frets to get them to where we need them to be. Actually looks like it's not even, it's just kissing the 18th fret, but that's clearly in its own little personal dip. Yeah, I think understanding it this way could it would say to me that, you know, the basic fretwork is really good, apart from this one that's clearly not seated properly, but generally speaking the fretwork's really good. Now if you want to make an out-of-the-box guitar better than it already is, maybe just change the construction of the neck a little bit. And it may be marginally more expensive, I don't know, but it may get, you know, produce such good results that customers make up for the, you know, buy more, make up for the difference. So what I'm going to do while I've got these old strings on is I'm going to put a dab of glue on here and seat this on with the strings pulling down so it's back in position. What I can do while I'm at it is, since we've only got one camera, I've kind of gone around the back of the nut here and made a little bit furry with the file coming over the top, so I can just run this over the top and just tidy it up a little bit. Okay. Once you've when you're doing the first fret action to such a kind of precise level, what you really want to make sure of is that once you're there and you've seated all the strings and they perform the way you want, damn it, where's my fingers? Oh, hellfire, come on. You absolutely want to make sure that that you don't accidentally clear out any more of the material that's currently on the the shelf, because if you do, what will happen is you'll suddenly find yourself below the minimum height that you wanted. So once we've got it down to this minimal first fret action, we want it to sit right there. We don't want any more, don't want to take any more glue off the shelf, or even get carried away and use the nut shelf sanding block or anything like that, because just a quick go of that and we'll have a different height, and what was perfect will suddenly become, oh, we've got to knock out the nut and do it all again. So I'm just doing these up to while we let the glue go off. So that's that. What I'm going to do now is get rid of this. Next stage will be recrowning, followed by sanding and polishing out, which I'll do off camera while I try and figure out my other camera. It may only do this. I keep looking at where the camera should be. It may only do this memory clearance when I'm back home, but I've got no clear idea. There's no feedback of how it does it or why it does it or doesn't do it. So I'm just kind of stuck there with a clogged up machine waiting for it to free itself up if it feels like it. And being, like I said, being Apple, there is not a single piece of online information that will tell you how to do it. It's just really pee poor as a system, I have to say. Like, the problem is, you say, well, you sucker, why do you keep buying it? And I keep buying it because once they got you, they got you. They do. Yeah, unfortunately they do. The thought of trying to change over to a different system is, to MS-DOS. No, what's that thing called? Micro light word, or no, you know what I mean. The Bill Gatesian thing. To change across to Windows or whatever that stupid thing is. It's just too. I would, at this age in my life, I would think I'd probably just give up using computers altogether. And that's what those dastardly creeps at Apple know. They got all of us that were infected in about 1993 when we were doing our dissertations or whatever at art school. I was going to say university, but art school is probably a better way of putting it. Yeah, at art school, doing my dissertation on that grey box that was called a Mac. What was it, Mac Classic or SE or something? Mac Plus, Mac, some horrible grey thing. But it was pretty miraculous actually in its time. I remember the sort of square-looking little mouse and the big tall keys on the keyboard that made really loud clonking noises. And once you've written your dissertation in that, I remember whole corridors of people in the art school sitting, clattering away at this thing. It was just, that's incredible when you think about it. It's the big thing. So I'm going to put this back where it should be, which should be like so, which is the only accurate setting this damn thing should have, beyond which, after which, it's rubbish. And actually what I noticed is it seems to be a little bit rounded off already, so I'm not sure if it wants to do up properly. I'll try and find a suitable hex-tastic key. I'll try so we can get it to stay. Oh, golly, oh gosh, it isn't going to do it for us. Perhaps this one. This looks a likely lad. No. What sort of foreign currency is this? Oh. Yes, the Apple, the computers. Can't you type up your dissertation on the computer, Sam? Yes. think did you have to book them, or maybe you queued up or something to get a go at them? There we go. Finds the one. Finds the one. There you go. Now we're in 2 rows, two staggers, 3 for 3 wound, 3 plain. That's how it should be. So it wasn't even in the right position for all its funky adjustability. Anyway, yeah. So we wrote our essays. I guess 1992 and 93 were the first times. I think it must have been 92 was the first go. We wrote something down in our books. 1992. And people were doing things like the history of feminist photography from 1846 to Cindy Sherman and the male postmodern gaze in modern image making. Roland Barthes. What was the bloke with the pissoir? Duchamp. So there's a whole bunch of people that you had to know about Marcel Duchamp. And it's so stupid that I even remember to this day the name of one of his completely naff pieces of art. If you ask me, and I know you're not asking me, but if you were to ask me, there was one which was it was called The Large Glass or something, and it was just, you know, some squiggles and pretentious nonsense on a large old pane of glass type of thing. And it was called, wait for it, The Bachelor Stripped Bare, no, The Bride, Bachelor, The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelors, comma, even. I mean, really, honestly, is that or is that not a bit pretentious? I thought you'd say that. Anyway, that was the kind of stuff we looked at, and we were supposed to have some admiration for Duchamp. He made a art out of a Parisian street urinal, I think, to remember, something like that. And they credited him with being the first or the prime mover of and shaker of the use of found objects. So that a thing, anything, not just a painting, but a thing could be put in a gallery and made into art. I suppose that's, if it creates a discussion, then it's interesting. We should talk about it. But I always thought that a lot of that stuff was a bit pseudo. So they drummed it into us, and there was a whole lot of stuff about how because we were when I started at that college, not only had the first kind of computers come in, but the Mac computer brought with it this sort of emergent thing. The web wasn't in it. Well, it was just starting, the World Wide Web or the internet, but it brought with it this application called HyperCard, which was like I suppose you imagined it as a visual thing on screens, a card index with imaginary virtual cards, but you could navigate from one card to another, card being obviously in inverted commas because it was made of digital data. But so you would start by kind of making presentations where you could have a button on the screen where miraculously you went from a page of text to another page of text, or you linked from a word in one page of text to a picture, or a, heaven forbid, a grainy little piece of video that like stop motion Victorian film, and took up all of the computer's memory for a second of black and white dithered, what was it, 2-bit or something. So I'm whizzing past these because they've hardly been touched at all, apart from this one on this end here, which has had more work done. Yeah, so that was the days that we were getting into it, and so that the tutors and lecturers and whatever, and the academics were highly interested in this new technology, and its implications for art, culture, yada yada yada, storytelling. So as soon as you had this new thing coming into the world called the Mac, and this hypercard particularly, which then, as I say, became Supercard, and then it became things like Macromine Director, which was a sort of like a basic multimedia programming environment. So again, working with pages of text and images, but it started to be much more powerful and could move things around on screen at your kind of instructions. You told things to do things. Anyhow, I'm just getting some of the basic gunge off here first before I put the tape on it. It's quite a bit. So that's sort of 92, 93, along with this technology that we were using for writing our essays and pottering about, trying out some of these new weird things called hypertext and hyperlinking, and the new word multimedia, which you could have words, videos and sounds controlled by one screen and one user. Anyway, so that was kicking off, and alongside it went a bunch of theorists going, what if, and what happens if, and what will this do to narratives, and what will this do to the future of filmmaking, and yada and so on. And one of the kind of key things they jumped on straight away was this idea of if hypertext is this thing that you can instead of navigating from the start to the finish of a book, now suddenly we can navigate information from here to here, and jumping by links from one pile of information. So you didn't ever have to have it all stacked in a linear format anymore. You'd navigate it via links, and all you had to do was choose where you put the links, and maybe even in the future you wouldn't even have to think about that, and some software like Google algorithm would produce the connections for you. And so it was all the heyday of celebrating that, and the academics, the middle-aged lecturers were falling over themselves to learn these technologies so that they could become credible and conversant. And also they had to be seen to be doing artworks, because they had to produce some practical work and exhibit it, and as well as some theoretical writings and papers. And so they really needed to be kind of able to use it to make some artworks. And of course it was a bit of a undignified scramble, because the kids were always a mile ahead than the lecturers, because the lecturers didn't have the time. They were too busy teaching and marking things. So meanwhile the kids were just playing on these computers all day, trying things out. So the poor old tutors' digital media works in those 1993, 94, 95 era was always clunky, and actually always the lecturer had some student who knew what they were doing the programming for them, programming as it was called. Anyway, it was a funny old time. And interestingly, when I finished teaching there in when I finished my degree there in 1993, I didn't focus much on multimedia. I was much more interested in sort of sound. I suppose it was multimedia because it had sound, but it was good old-fashioned analog sound and sculptures, kinetic sculptures. So that was my fun. I used to make big glass things that wobbled, and noise responded to sound and tipped over on springs and looked dangerous and were dangerous. Anyway, but so I wasn't kind of up on the multimedia. So I wasn't overly blown away by the multimedia angle. But when I finished my degree, they asked me if I wanted to stay on and teach, because I suppose a lot of people lived locally, but I lived locally-ish, and I was probably quite good at video editing, and you wouldn't believe it from watching my videos now. But I could edit, and I could use the digital editing software and things like that. So I was asked if I wanted to stay on they called you I would be called a visiting tutor or something, and really I would soak up a lot of the sort of practical teaching for a decent wage in those days. It was 25 quid an hour compared to maybe 4 or 5 quid an hour doing anything else in the town of Newport, where the college, near where the college was. Anywho, so I stayed on. So 93, 94, I was doing this part-time teaching, and then by about 96, I was kind of feeling like I was not tired of teaching, but I felt a bit sort of empty. You know, I wasn't doing any practical work myself. I was just doing the teaching and going home and, you know, to my new wife and child's. I felt like I wanted to put something back in, so I applied for a MA course, master's course in goldsmiths, and I went and did their Design Futures course, which was quite a radical course at the time, and it sort of followed on quite nicely from the slightly radical interactive arts courses that I'd been on in the Newport College. Well, it's sort of fine arts. I was the last year of fine arts, but it was leaning heavily towards interactive arts, which it then stayed being called. Anyway, so I went and did this masters in goldsmiths, and I sort of carried on doing the part-time teaching, but and actually then I went from part-time teaching to applying for a full-time job at Newport and got that, and then kind of taught there for a couple of years, and then went across to Bristol and taught there, and that was my academic career. But it was funny, because even when I started being a lecturer at the college in about, I suppose around about 1998, I was full-time at Newport, and so I was kind of sharing an office with people who were my tutors back in about 1993, and so those same tutors who were scrabbling to be digitally relevant with their artworks at the time, you know, I was supposed to be one of them, and I was supposed to you know, do my own practice, inverted commas, and I was making some video films at the time, which kind of was my practice, but it wasn't very creative, or it wasn't very artsy. And actually I don't think I ever really got very creatively artsy again in the whole time that I was doing that sort of teaching. Because the truth is, I don't think there was ever enough time really to do your own practice and run a course in a university. You know, maybe some people could do it, I wasn't organised or disciplined, or I didn't have enough beans in the engine to do it, so it definitely wasn't very good for me. So I instead of feeling like my practice was informing teaching, I just felt like I was just staying head above water doing the teaching part, which is ultimately not very satisfying. So before too long I jacketed it in, but anyway, but the pressure was on me as well to be one of those now, Stuart, I'm going to do something you might not like, but I am going to remove the plastic on your car seats. Sorry, it's not a criticism, personal one. And I also will do, I will borrow them back just to cover up the little lettering so we don't pull it off with the tape. Yeah, so that was funny to find myself being a lecturer and then kind of slightly under the cosh, if you like, to produce, you know, digitally relevant, cutting-edge work, and actually, I just found it all a bit fraudulent, you know. And the truth is, I was quite good at making things that looked impressive and worked and did what they were supposed to, you know, as a sort of credible-looking artwork. But actually, I never did anything that really challenged me. So it was a coward's way of making work. You know, I suppose it was you could call it a facsimile, or you know, somebody doing an impression of fine art or modern art or whatever, and I could do it quite well, and I could speak the speak and talk the talk and make the makey things, but there wasn't any passion or risk or heart and soul in it really. It was just, you know, I would set myself a task and make something technological happen that looked interesting, and sure, it raised questions and blah 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 and all those things that, you know, bits of work are supposed to do, but it never challenged me, because I always knew I could do it, and I never went out on a limb and took a risk, and that's my failing, not the art world, frankly. But I felt there was, even still, I felt there was very little with real passion and creativity going around. You know, and I think I found myself drawn back towards, you know, the classic painters, the great painters, and, you know, some of those traditional artworks that took great skill and years of sacrifice and struggle to become good at. And, you know, the problem with the digital arts and stuff is it just seemed too easy to do them off the cuff, as I was doing, sort of thing, you know. And I didn't like that. It felt empty, really. So I rather than fake it, I wouldn't partake in it. I didn't want to fake it. Or I didn't want to breeze through it just because I could bullshit my way through. Anyway, so that was my a brief history of my time at the beginning of the digital revolution. But I was on digital. I was sort of around digital technology even before that, because I worked for BP. Let me just check the time. Let me check the time. I suppose I've got any freed up memory yet, have I? 7:30. Any freed up memory? Let me just quickly check the memory box. Memory. Okay. Settings. General. iPhone storage. Nope. We're still short. So it's holding on to all the video I shot yesterday, about 50 gigabits of video, GBs, and it's holding on to them. It's still got them there, and it's claiming, I've told it every which way to delete it, and it's not doing it. Anyway, yeah, so probably may have told this before, so if you've ever heard this, please ignore me, but a long time ago, 1983, I spent most of it in Trinidad, trying to, supposedly, working for my stepdad, which was a bit of a disaster for a number of reasons, but it didn't really work out. Anyway, but I was in Trinidad in the West Indies for most of that year, but eventually the thing didn't work out and I had to come back to the UK. So I came back, and my mother was living in Florida. I didn't see my dad at all, and the only place I had to go was got back in with an old girlfriend, reasonably current, but we weren't really going anywhere, but we sort of ended up falling back in with each other, which was a complete waste of time. I should have been more grown up and a little bit more courageous and not done that, but anyhow. So I was in London then, sort of needing to do something, and I was only, 21? So I didn't have a career or anything. I'd never done any serious things other than bits and pieces, knocking about jobs, as you do. So I need a pointy thing. Now, where's the pointy thing going to go? Because this is nice and spongy, but to be honest, it needs to be more like that. But it needs to be. Probably just throw these away. Yes. Anyway, so I'd never done any sort of work. So the nearest I knew what to do was to, in those days it was very, the thing in London too, well, that's a bit hard. I need a foamy thing, not such a hard thing. It's the right shape, but it's cork. Yeah, so I guess I've only got this. It's not really the right size, but that's all I've got. Yeah, so all I knew to do was to go and get some temporary work. So I don't know if any of you similar age to me, but you remember going down to the temp agencies. That's what you did, and you sort of signed up to their books, and then they called you and they said, all right, do you want to work for, I don't know, such and such, Marks and Spencer's, Boots, Sainsbury's, whatever, and you took whatever, you know, job you couldn't avoid taking if you needed the money, and off you went. And a lot of it, I remember at the time, was office-based work. Because in those days there was a thing called filing. Do you remember? And people would. I'm trying to figure out how I can use this. I want this to hold. Maybe even just that will work. Yeah. So I remember getting I got a temp job, and I ended up in a big tall building in Collier's Wood in London. The building was called Brown and Root House. Brown and Root House, Collier's Wood. And so I was sort of doing paperworky, filing-y things for some grown-up blokes doing something. And you know, I was one of several sort of. You can imagine if it was like wartime, we'd be runners in the trench. You know, it was just some sort of poxy kid who would do anything and whatever anyone told him to do. And so it quickly turned out that it was a lot to do with, all to do with filing. I can do this. Let me try and cut this into a bit of a better shape. Yeah, so filing all these important documents, because it was the era of paper. So these engineers, or whatever they were making, they would produce reams of paper, and some little sort of kid like me would come along and I'm trying to figure out the best way to use this. Yeah, someone like me would come along and file it, spend hours putting these bits of paper away in some specific file. And anyway, but before long, I worked out that the company I was working for, or Brown and Root, who owned this engineering company, was hosting British Petroleum, who were building, working with Brown and Root, or the contract. Brown and Root was doing the project for them, and they were building oil rigs jackets for the North Sea, and I just found that really interesting. So I kind of, rather than be bored and just sit there filing stuff, I made it my business to find out what was going on and stick my nose into everything I could. And I sort of I've always really taken that attitude. And it's not from any noble thing other than, you know, if it's choice between being bored and learning as much as I can, I always take the find out whatever I can in any given situation type of approach. So yeah, before long I kind of figured out that they were building this oil rig, which I thought was massively interesting, because it was this huge, great, huge, great engineering thing offshore. So it was all full of, it was massive, and it was big boys' toys engineering stuff. Anyway, so I kind of did all my filing and whatnot, and kept an eye out on what they were doing. And it was very, very interesting. And at the time, it was, as I say, it was all paperwork, and they would produce, when you came to an agreement about some aspect of the project, you produced, you wrote a memo and filed the memo and sent it to the people, and in the building those pieces of paper were carried around by male boys and girls who spent the whole week just circulating the building, dropping off and picking up critical communications, bits of information. And in our office, because the project involved quite a bit of overseas site stuff, so we had parts of the platform were being built in, some were being built in Italy, some were being built in Norway, some were being built in Japan. That was very far flung, and so to keep in communication, all the communication between those far flung sites were done by telex. This was 1983, early 84, and because of that, there was therefore a guy who sat in the corner in this mysterious machine called a telex machine with these bits of tape as well as bits of paper that came out. So the paper came out with, you know, the words on it, you know, situation report from such and such site, but also the record was kept on this weird yellow tape, a bit like this colour, and it was fairly common knowledge amongst the people like me who worked in the sort of admin-y side of all of this, that the telex guy was being paid an absolute fortune compared to any of the rest of us. So we learned very quickly that the guy who had his finger on the kind of the communications tech of the moment certainly got paid nearly as much as the engineers who were designing the thing, which was a lot of money. You know, they were on sort of 50 quid an hour compared to us at the time on about £8 an hour maximum, maybe even less in those days. But anyway, probably less. Think about it, it must have been way less. But anyway, so the welding engineers and all the guys who were designing this thing, they were raking it in. Next best was the telex guy. I remember his name. He had a miraculous chance if he ever saw this. I don't know how old he'd be now. His name was Dick Tetamandi, a very unusual name. I've never heard another one, but he was the telex guy. And anyway, so around about 1984, at the height of his empire, I got wind that my boss was thinking about getting in either or a sort of a new system called British Telecom Gold, and it was this. We had a couple of very old IBM machines, and in fact somewhere we had a System 38 machine, a great room full of computer that ran all these big spinny tapes, and that was another well-paid guy, the guy who ran that thing all day long. But yeah, my boss they were making a decision to get in this new service called British Telecom Gold, and it was obviously it was supplied by BT, and it was this new thing where you could send something called an email. 1984, and it had a screen, like a green screen, like a PC screen at the time, which could only do, you know, ASCII type characters, and you had a phone. You used your office phone, and you had an acoustic coupling device connected to this box, and you took the phone. You know, you don't know phones like this if you're young. Big phone with a big thing here and a big thing there, a big handle, and you'd kind of go plug it into this acoustic coupler. So you literally handed over what was audible on the phone, the microphone and the earphone part of the phone. You plugged it into this listening thing, which could pick up what was being said or the noises coming down the phone. And then you pressed the button, and your phone, or the machine that used your phone to talk, your computery thing made this incredible, you know, the stuff that actually many of us will still remember from the early days of dial-up internet. So it's that sort of sound, firing data straight down the phone line audibly, and so the acoustic coupler was a modem, and it would then convert that into binary and digital information, and send that down to the other end, wherever the other end was. And of course, in BT world, it was up to BT somewhere, and then BT put it out to whoever else was on the end of one of their phone lines and had this system and could receive the email. And so Dick, in his corner, I could see that he knew that his time was coming to an end. There was nothing he could do. I wish now, looking back, I wish I'd had the time to talk to him a lot more about it, because it was a significant transformation moment. But I can't quite remember, because I was the guy that was, because I was enthusiastic and got my fingers dirty and everything. I was the guy that was going to be using it. So I sort of basically took over the site communication using this Telecom Gold thing, and Dick Tetamandi, bless his soul, was phased out, off to another career somewhere, or maybe early retirement or something, because he'd earned so much. But I remember for that year using this Telecom Gold system, but it really was the first encounter I or anybody in our office had with email. And even though it was clunky, it was regular, the line would frequently drop, and you'd be redialing and recalling, and then you'd end without bleeping and blooping and stuff. But to have a report from our engineer on the construction site in Japan come printing out within seconds of him sending it from Japan, that was quite incredible. And of course, telex operators had enjoyed that sort of communications immediacy. The same as back in, on the old Titanic, same as the telegraph operators, Morse coders would have experienced that same thrill of being instantaneously able to talk to places thousands of miles away, hundreds of thousands of miles away. So yeah, that's where it began, and the beginnings of email and telex. Mr. Telex, went on his way, and to this day, I don't know what happened to him, but he was the last of the. In fact, he was the first and the last telex operator I knew, and it was just I met him at that crossover time. So it was kind of wildy westy, and then I think in the offices I worked in, I worked for the oil companies, mostly off and on for the next 5-6 years. And my next kind of dealings with the computer is I was working for a company, and in 1986 they sent me and one of the original IBM XTs, IBM PC, or no, it was the IBM PC, not the AT, but the PC, the first one. So I took that, flew to Germany, Düsseldorf region, went and installed myself with a bunch of clients, inspectors, in a steel pipe production plant, and our job was to be the client's overseers on the production of the pipes for an offshore pipeline. And it was the first use of computer that I'd ever seen, and the job of the computer, me, was to record a mixture of data for every single pipe that was manufactured. So when you have things like North Sea pipelines, every single pipe has its own unique identity. Now, it doesn't sound like crazy anymore, because it's sort of logical, but in those days it used to, I think before the computer days, they used to keep records of the pipes, because there was so much riding on it, that if a single pipe failed somewhere in the North Sea and caused a catastrophe, then they had to be able to work out what the fault was. Was it a chemical composition error? Was it you know, was there something in the weld radiography that showed up that the welding wasn't adequate, and basically, you know, all so that somebody could be blamed and charged for the catastrophe. So nothing new there. But yeah, that was so when they, of course, as soon as the computer came along, not only did they realise that it could do the email to and fro around the world, that was a fantastic, obvious boon, but they also realised that, or clever people realised that it was perfect for holding and recalling the manufacturing data of all of these pipes, which are an incredibly dreary, dull, boring thing to, on one level, to record data about, but absolutely vital when you consider the millions and upon millions of pounds at the time, billions nowadays, but the millions that went into these pipelines and the millions at stake, you know, for the transport of crude oil from the North Sea onshore into the you know, those places, refineries and whatnot. Anyway, so it became, the computer very quickly became the obvious tool for doing that. But it was very Wild Westy in that, you know, the first people to figure out that would be how it would best be used in that industry, or one of the best ways to use it, was the people who were already, you know, doing the job of being the client's production inspectors, and those people who were already earning their money as welding inspectors and offshore pipe laying inspectors and so on. Those companies started to quickly get people in who could use these machines to put together databases, or databases basically, to hold information. Of course, there was nothing you wouldn't buy anything off the shelf. It was you had to get a couple of bright sparks who really knew, you know, who were usually youngsters who'd done computer degrees and were, you know, had their Commodores at home and were making them do extraordinarily weird things. And then so the inspection company would get hold of a couple of these lads and lock them in a room and promise them pizzas if they could come up with an interactive databases type system that you could not only record all this information about the production of these pipes, because there would be chemical constitution of the steel, the hardness of the test, you know, the steel tests for hardness and shear strength and all that kind of technical stuff. So yeah, these totally unsuitable boys from the world of the bedroom computers, because it was, you know, it was a brand new field. There was nobody really in it at the time. But you get hold of these sort of bedroom computer lads who'd never had any offshore oil experience whatsoever, and you'd put them with a couple of old guys who used to be welding inspectors, who'd then become directors of an inspection company, but now wanted to get the upper hand by being the first one to have this computerized system. So they would then be telling these lads what to do. You know, I need it to do this, and then the lads would sort of fail to understand the real world application a lot of the time, and then they would put together some sort of database. And I remember the ones in the company I worked for, they did it in a programming thing called DBase 3, and it was quite simple, but it was, you know, effective and dreary. So you could store, I ended up inputting the production kind of data, chemical info, you know, batch numbers, identities, you know, test results and all the rest of it, all linked in for this production run of pipes in Mannesmann pipe works in Germany, for example, throughout all of 1986. And I must have sat in this little dirty windowed office in this hot summer in Germany. So I must have sat there the whole summer and put in millions upon millions of characters, sharing the office with this rheumy-eyed alcoholic Welshman. He was a kind of brutal I don't know what the word would be, not terrorist, what's the word, a very, very strict and harsh character. Anyway, me and him and a few lads from Teesside and Huddersfield and places like that. And I spent most of the year recording this data for the pipes, with the idea being simply that if something went wrong in the future, somebody could come back to this database and go, obviously they would know what pipe number had failed because they had the identities on them. And then they would go, right, pipe number ZX something something something, where was it made, so and so and so on, pull up the records, here's the days it was made on, here's the batch number it came from, here's how many passed the strength tests on that day, and here's some, all that kind of stuff. And then they could presumably go rushing after somebody they could blame and sue for all the recompense. Anyway, so that was my. So after having done my dissertation, or essays or whatever, it's a bit grand. My essays on this kind of grey clackety clack Apple Mac, don't come back. Then my next sort of real encounter was, my first encounter was this D-Base 3 Telecom Gold, and that was kind of a lot of Microsofty type, mainly Microsofty stuff, but and then into the early 90s, as I say, my next encounter was with the Macs in the college corridors to write my papers. And then after that, it was sort of teaching, using them, and sort of getting into some of the earliest bits of software, as I said, the HyperCard, or whatever it was called, which actually was quite interesting, the idea that you could tell these non-linear stories. Anyway, so the reason for the story, other than just passing the time while I finish this setup, is by the mid-90s, 94, 95, we were, let me go back. By the late 80s, the top of the range computers in the offices where I worked were the IBM, I think they were called the XT or something. It was there was a 256 or something. It was some of the first ever colour monitor things, and they looked splendid. So this isn't fitting in at all. Why isn't that going in? And this is, so it's interesting. The ball doesn't want to fit in the end of this one. It's trying to sit out. There we go. Now it's in. And it's moved. It's actually moved its height, so I'm going to have to adjust it now. Yeah. So in the late 80s, I still hadn't discovered Macs, and I guess the main thing was that PCs in the office were these colour. We've got the advent of the first colour screened PCs, which was just, wow, amazing. And that was, I remember playing games like Captain Comic and other such platform. I think Prince probably started playing Prince of Persia as well, the original version. It was just like literally a platform thing. And that was either on a mixture of green screen. I think I went away on another job, because a couple of the jobs I took for the oil industry, I would take these big IBM things. They were just huge to carry around. I'd either be on a train going up to Edinburgh to the pipe coaters up in Leith, or I'd be going to Germany or something and having to carry this thing with me on a plane luggage. And amazingly, we always got there in one piece. But and then I think I moved from. I went from those green screen ATs or PCs, IBM PCs, the first ones. And then somebody issued me with a, I think it was a, whatever that thing was called, a compact, and it was a thing with a, you know, little, was it a colour screen? I think it had, no, actually I think the compact was a kind of monotone thing because it was so, all its cleverness went on being small enough to carry with you. And then I think I went on a job in Japan for the oil industry. About the last job I did actually for them was in about 1990, and I took a Toshiba laptop, which was just terrible by modern standards. It literally couldn't do anything other than just the database thing that we had to run. It had no other redeeming qualities. There wasn't anything you could play on it. There wasn't anything you could do to pass the time. I learned how to kind of draw pictures in ASCII codes, which was quite fun. So I used some of the notepads to mess about drawing pictures, but that was about as exciting as it got even then. And then we went into the sort of 90, 91, 92, and then that was the first appearance of the Mac in the colleges. And by about 96, I got my first Mac because I was a lecturer, right, and I had to have one. And I bought they had a name, and it was a very handsome thing. It had a kind of, it was like a forerunner, I think it was a Performer, Mac Performer 5300 in fact. And it had, you know, obviously colour. It could play CD-ROMs, can you believe? And, you know, some of those first ever kind of mixture of live video and computer games were on disc, and they were just, the graphics and stuff were incredible for that time. And about the I think in the late 80s I played a few basic flight simulators on the IBMs that I took around for work, but I think around about the 1995 or 6-ish, I think I kind of discovered some of the flight simulators like Warbirds and things like that, and started playing that a bit. But I was never that gamey really. And then I think just from there I just sort of plodded along the Mac thing. But the reason I was telling all of this story was because, funnily enough, being around at the beginning where all these academics were blown away by, more than anything else, the computer's hypertextual, sounds like a lecturer talking, a hypertextual potential. You know, in other words, the ability to create non-linear narratives and that sort of democratizing of meaning and all that stuff. And they were, you know, lecturers just loved that. That was right up the street. So everything all the papers they wrote and the books they, you know, contributed to were all about this stuff. To be fair, it was interesting, you know, asking questions of, you know, what will happen to the history books and truth and authority if ... you know, if you know, if there's no single view of anything, and from now on, you know, everyone can have a different, come to an event or happening from a different perspective. So of course, you know, while kids were just busy trying to play games as fast as they could, the academics were busy trying to talk about the sort of the end of truth and the beginning of the truly hypertextual democratization of meaning and all that. So yeah, lots of good stuff for them to chat about. Yeah. And let me just get this tuned up, the basic tuning. Yeah, so but it was interesting because it suited the academics, because I think they've been talking a lot of, around the time I went to the art school and before the computers really hit the scene,